to eliminate big private property, not just small private property, which we all own, like people own a house, a car, or even a boat, or something, what you use personally. But certainly, after the October Revolution, our banks, our factories, our big trade enterprises, and big estates, enormous estates, certainly by Russia, and they were all nationalized, and they became property of the people. So this, I think, was something that created some kind of a shock among people, among wealthy people all over the world. Because this was an example which, whether we are successful or not very successful, this is another problem. But at any rate, this was an attempt to create a new society, and we are building up this society. 64 years, which we exist, is not such a long term, and we have a lot of problems. We are trying to settle these problems, to solve these problems which we have. But at any rate, this is certainly a new society. And I think that very much is connected with this attitude that we are somehow something unlawful, that it is something temporary, that it is maybe some kind of a mistake of history that a society like that came up. And here comes this attitude towards us that we are dangerous, that we are some kind of people who threaten everybody, and so on. And then to that was added other differences in our political approach, differences to approaching various things that happened in the world. And also for United States, I think also that this system, which was considered ineffective and something like a mistake of history, this system still helped to develop our country in spite of terrible wars that we went through, in spite of terrible destructions and losses. You know that in the last war we lost over 20 million people. These are mostly young people in their 20s who may have had their families, or who may have had some bright people, maybe scientists or I don't know, writers or musicians or whoever. But 20 million people were killed in this war. So, in spite of these terrible losses, we managed to become now one of the two most powerful nations on the globe. So, something is in our system that gave us the possibility to become one of the two biggest powers in the world and to achieve parity, at any rate in the field of defense, parity with such a powerful nation and such a rich nation and such a developed nations like the United States. That we now even hear from people from so to say responsible people here in your countries that they are afraid of the Soviet, that we are so powerful, that America is afraid. So this is really something that so to say, cause some satisfaction in our country, because we really succeeded to become a world power in spite of all these terrible losses and difficulties. But I think this is one of the problems which also creates certain attitudes in United States, because United States was always lived always in a very specific, so to say, environment, and was really quite safe, because you have been protected by these enormous oceans. Nobody invaded you. You had weak or small or friendly neighbors whom we never had throughout our history. And you were not attacked, you were not overrun, your country was not occupied, not destroyed, not burned down, and so on. So you really lived in a very safe world. When America participated in wars, so it was somewhere overseas, your boys have been fighting there with comparatively smaller casualties than the European powers. And also, usually every war made America even richer, because you developed your production, your industry, you developed your science and technology, and like the last war showed that you really became much stronger after the war, because you didn't have this destruction which we had. So now, of course, when we have these terrible weapons, most of our countries will possess these weapons, So it is not only the fact that there is another power which is considered to challenging some American interest, although I would challenge it, because I think we are not challenging American interest. If you just look, is it Afghanistan that really is so important to America that America is prepared to go to war with the Soviet Union and sacrifice also 20 million acceptable losses in a nuclear exchange? Is it really so important? It is a specific thing. We can talk about that. The question will come up. But in general, what if we look at it? How do we threaten America? Or do we export something here, like the Japanese, who export their cars, and some American workers complain that they lose their jobs because they cannot produce it? We are not doing that. We are not exporting anything to America. We are not making American workers unemployed. We are not. We have no claims on any American territory. We have sold our Alaska long before, but we never raised these questions. Like the Chinese want to get some territories which they claim to have had some 400 years ago. But we don't do it. We don't have any territorial claims. And actually, there is really nothing in our relationships that would make America so fearful about the Soviet Union. So, of course, the point that there is another power, there is really such a power in our globe, it makes America uncomfortable, because otherwise, really, you would do whatever you want in the whole world. But we have some of our friends. I sometimes ask us to help them, and we have certain principles, like the principle of helping the liberation movements and so on. So, of course, we are somehow so there's some things that make some problems for American policy. But we can say the same about America. America makes a lot of problems for our policy, certainly. But it doesn't mean that we should go to war or that we should consider America to be our enemy. We never consider America to be our enemy. But of course, this fact that we exist, and we exist as a powerful nation, of course, creates this attitude, because we make it difficult for America to implement its policy all over the world. But the other point is also that we possess the same weapons which America possesses, and that we can destroy America in the same way as America can destroy us. And this is, I think, another important point, because this is for the first time in American history that now America is not safe anymore, and that your territory is as vulnerable as the territory of any other country in the world. And this is something that is very difficult. I understand it is very difficult to American people to adjust to this situation, because you never have been in such a situation. We have been living through centuries, always having invasions and people attacking us and fighting and occupation of our territory, and we have been fighting somewhere in Europe, and some other European countries have been fighting on our territory, so it happened all the time. You didn't have it. And now there is an attempt to make America safe again. And that's what probably helped Reagan to come to power, because he said his slogan was, and we still can see it in some, when we drive on the highways, make America strong again with Reagan. But what does it mean? How should we understand in the Soviet Union? How we should understand this formula, make America strong again? It means that America may be the strongest power in the world again, which will never happen. Or may America be safe again from military threat? It will also never happen as long as the weapons are there. So I think that really the only way for the United States to get this security back is, I think, that if everybody agrees that we have to destroy nuclear weapons. Then America will be again behind the oceans, then nobody will invade you and nobody will threaten you, and we all can live in peace. And I think that this is the most important problem now for us to get to start or to resume negotiations and to come to an agreement about reduction of nuclear weapons, and in the long run of eliminating nuclear weapons in general, because only then really your country and our country and Europe really can be safe. There was a lot of talk here, in your country, especially in the last year or so, that the Soviet Union has a doctrine that we can win a nuclear war. We can wage that we can survive a nuclear war, which is not right. We don't have such a doctrine. Our doctrine is that a nuclear war is not winnable, that it is impossible to survive a nuclear war, and that if this war happens, then everything will be destroyed. So the only thing is not to make all kinds of theories about possibilities of limited wars, of possibilities to survive, but to do something in order to prevent this war, in order to let never such a war happen. So this is a point which I think is very important to understand, because there is still some misunderstanding, and people are thinking that we think that we can win a war. People speak about our civil defense and all kinds of things like that. There was some in the initial period when the nuclear and atomic weapons came about. There was some theories that maybe one can have such a civil defense that one can survive. But at any rate, in the last 10 or 15 years, it is quite clear that no civil defense will help. That even if some people will survive underground, the environment will be destroyed to such an extent that it will be impossible to get out, and if they get out, finally they'll have no possibility to live and to develop, because everything will be poisoned and destroyed, and maybe in general life, of course, will be eliminated after nuclear exchange. So all this talk that the present American attitude is an answer to the Soviet doctrine that nuclear war is winnable is wrong. We don't have such a doctrine. But we feel that here in America there are people who think that that really that the nuclear war can be fought and can be won, and that some kind of limited exchanges may occur, and that maybe we should work out some rules for waging a nuclear war. But and I must tell you that I have been here present at many seminars and conferences of academic people in different parts of this country. And for some time there was such an attempt to involve us in discussion about how we could wage a nuclear war. But we always refused to participate in such discussion because we consider that it's not worthwhile to work out any scenarios about that, because this war should not happen in general. And we cannot, we are not prepared to discuss anything how this war will be going on, because we think that it will be wholesale destruction and we have to eliminate this war. Now, whether it is possible to achieve this superiority, and why there is an attempt to achieve this superiority over the Soviet Union. I think that this is the only way how we can explain this enormous military budget which your country is now your government has now presented, and which means that there will be an attempt to build up strategic and nuclear weapons. We think, first of all, that it is useless to develop new nuclear weapons, because we have enough of them, and because we have accumulated such an amount of these weapons that we can destroy each other many times, and it's worthwhile to spend more hundreds of billions of dollars in order to build more. The other point is that maybe some people think that some new devices can be developed which can protect America. I don't know whether you read this interview with Professor Richard Pipes in Washington Post. I think it was previous or a couple of, some 10 days ago. It was in the Sunday edition in the Outlook. And he said there that maybe it would be possible to create some kind of electronic or some kind of umbrella over United States and its allies, so that Soviet missiles which will be sent towards the United States will explode somewhere far away in space, and that's how America will be safe. Of course, if this develops, then we are in danger, because it means that if you develop such device or such a system of protection, then it will be very tempting for you to destroy us, because we are not going to have such a system of protection. So this is a very destabilizing idea. But I hope that, first of all, it is probably not so easy, not so simple to have such a, to develop such a system. And on the other hand, that if really something like that happens, probably our scientists will have to develop some of their own systems to penetrate this system. You see. So we'll never finish it. We'll go on and go on until we just destroy each other by these terrible military expenditures, and while we have at home, both of us, many problems which we could solve by some additional money and resources and manpower which we can use at home for peaceful purposes. So this is, well, we're now really at the point when something has to be done about that, because if we don't start negotiation, if we don't come to serious agreements, then the arms race will continue, and the outcome of it is not foreseeable, and it is very, very dangerous. You know that we have been talking about arms control for a very long time, and finally we got this agreement which was signed between President Carter and President Berezhkov in Vienna in the summer of '79. Then it was rejected by the new administration, or even before the administration came to power. It was not ratified by the Senate, and actually it didn't come into force. But on the other hand, we all know that both countries stick to this agreement. So if really this agreement is so bad for the United States, so why do they stick to it? So is it really something in this agreement which is not acceptable for the United States? And I think that if we approach to this agreement, to this treaty, as a treaty which is based on equal security and on parity, then there is nothing bad about that, and both our countries may consider this treaty useful for both of us. But if one country wants to have superiority, then of course this treaty is not acceptable, because this treaty is based on equality. Now we have been hearing also a lot of talk about this margin of superiority or Soviet superiority and all kind of things like that. Actually, if you have been hearing probably, there was a lot of discussion about that. There is not a single responsible military figure in America who would trade Soviet strategic situation to American strategic situation, certainly. So it's clear that there is no superiority. There would be, probably they would be prepared to stay and to trade. The other point, if we count even these warheads, 9,000 warheads which you have, and 7,500 or so warheads which we have, so you have here superiority. In Europe, it's also the same thing. So we have an overall parity if we consider all the weapons. You see, this zero option which was proposed, you see, this is connected with the fact that the American side is counting only certain systems. You don't have missiles now in Europe, that's right. You had them, and then you removed them from Turkey, from other places after the Cuban crisis, Cuban Missile Crisis. But you have many other means of deliveries, and you have submarines very near to our territory, and you have a very strong air force, much stronger than ours, which can reach our territory. And in many cases, these so-called tactical weapons which United States and the NATO countries possess, I have in mind also Britain and France, for us it can be considered as strategic weapons, because you can reach our territory, and we cannot reach the territory of United States from by these medium-range missiles which we have installed. So the proposal actually, as we see it, this zero option means that we have to dismantle what we have and what creates actually now parity, rough parity, and the Western side is only will not be installing what they still didn't install. And if they install it, then the parity will be violated, and then we will have a disbalance, and then probably we will have to build up our weaponry. So here we are also in a situation that instead of starting negotiations about reduction, we both will be involved in increasing our weapons and in creating even more dangerous situation for both of us. Now also these proposals which are made by Secretary Weinberger, by President Reagan, by Secretary Haig, that the United States has to build up in order to, so to say, to influence the Russians and to make them more prepared for talks. But we are prepared for talks. We have been talking about our desire to resume talks all the way through. So we are prepared. It was not the Soviet Union who rejected the SALT Treaty. If we would reject the SALT Treaty, then maybe you would really consider that you have to build up and then force us to accept this treaty. But it was the United States who didn't accept this treaty. And we have been saying that we are prepared to resume these talks any moment. So it's not necessary to build up in order to influence our policy. Our policy is directed towards resuming these talks as soon as possible. So this also looks to us that this is not an attempt to influence the Soviet Union, but it is an attempt to get superiority over the Soviet Union and then to try to exert pressure and to introduce some kind of certain rules of behavior or something like that, you know, this linkage problem and so on, and so to say make us accept these one-sided American demands, which we certainly will not do. First of all, because we never have been capitulating before any power, however strong it was, and it threatened us. And the second, because even if you build up, you will still be in a situation that both our countries have the possibility to destroy each other many times. So if you can now destroy us, I don't know, some people say maybe 12 times, and we can destroy you 8 times. And then when you build up, you will be able to destroy us 18 times, for example. So what about that? It's right enough to destroy each other once. So I don't think that we will be really so scared by this build-up that we will immediately say, okay, now what are your terms, and we are going to accept whatever you tell us. We're still continuing our policy, which we consider is in the interest in our national interest and security interest. And so the important thing, I think, is to understand each other better, to try to somehow better study the real security interest of each side, to somehow take it into consideration, and on this basis to come to agreement. You see, we have had during the initial stage of the detente period of normalizing of relations in the beginning of the 70s, we have concluded many agreements with the United States, not only on arms control, but on cooperation in many fields, in scientific fields, in weather forecast, and in space, in medicine. There were about 150 agreements. Most of them are already expired or are going to expire very soon. So we have been asking the American government whether they will be prepared to extend this. Unfortunately, we did not have a positive reply. So the American side probably doesn't want this relationship. On the other side, we hear that there is mistrust, that it is difficult to trust each other and so on. But then why we break up this relationship? If we want to have more trust, then I think we better continue. Because it is not only that both our countries profit. It's not, you know, it also was a very strange attitude when President Carter decided to punish us by denouncing and by stopping these exchanges. Because it was both sides, for both sides it was important. It was in the same way punishing us as also punishing the American side. So that was for both of us important. But not only the problem of some practical results which can derive from these exchanges and these agreements, but also because of many people who were involved in these exchanges. There were really thousands or tens of thousands of people in every field who were working together, Americans and Russians, and trying to understand each other better and develop some degree of trust and so on. So if we are worried about trust or distrust, then we better try to develop our relationship and to have more people to get to know each other and so on. Of course, I know that many American people think that don't like our system. I would say that many Soviet people don't like everything in America. There are things which we consider good and we consider even worthwhile to study and maybe to apply in our system. But there are also many elements in your society and which we very much distaste. But we never say that until America doesn't change its system, we cannot have good relations with the United States. Now we hear from the same Professor Pipes, who is now one of President Reagan's advisors, that either the Soviet Union changes its system or we are heading towards war. So it means that if we don't change our system, then America is threatening us by war. So this is something which we certainly cannot accept. And we, on our side, we also will never say that America should somehow change its system and then we will improve relations. Our principle is that there should be a peaceful coexistence between states of different systems. And this is our policy. And by the way, this was put down into these basic principles of Soviet-American relations, which were signed in May '72 by President Nixon and President Berezhkov. They say that our relationship should be based on peaceful coexistence of states with different systems. So we have to accept the existence of both systems, or any other systems that may emerge on our planet, and we have to live peacefully together and to develop our relations. This is the only way, because otherwise we will destroy each other. The other point is that some Americans say that the Soviet Union is, so to say, up to destroy American system. And usually Khrushchev is quoted in this famous phrase that we will bury you, that he said once. Of course, he didn't have in mind that we will kill you and bury you and we will come here and destroy you and bury every American here. And what we will do, we will have here a Russian Republic or what? So this was, nobody understood it in such a way, but your mass media, the translation and so on. What he had in mind was that he had maybe somehow simplified, but he had in mind our, so to say, philosophical conception that the human society is changing, that capitalism will not exist forever, that sometime capitalism will be transformed into some other system, that this other system will be some kind of socialist system, and in this sense he had in mind that capitalism will pass away, while the socialist system will be still there, but the socialist system will also will not exist forever. We never say that our system will exist forever. It will certainly change. There will be another system. We consider that this will be communism. We don't have communism now in the Soviet Union. Usually people say it is communism, but we don't have communism. Communism will be maybe in some 100 or 200 years, we don't know that. But at any rate, we never say that our system will remain forever the same. Our system will also change. And this is the philosophical view which he had in mind and which then was presented in your country in the way that we are trying to, or we have this sinister plan to attack America, destroy it, and bury it, and so on. So, which also is used to actually create an image of the Soviet Union which doesn't exist in practice. So, I think that this was as an introduction. I think it was, maybe this is already enough. So, in order to leave some time for questions and answers. So.
Berezhkov, of course, has consented to answer questions.
We are very consistent about our foreign policy. Our foreign policy is to establish good and even friendly relations with everybody, first, including the United States. The second is to reduce armament, the burden of armaments, to eliminate disarmament, and to sort of develop economic relations. So this is the main principle. The other principle is to take care for the prosperity and development of the socialist community. This is also our principle, which is proclaimed and which we stick to, and everybody knows about it. And one more principle maybe is our commitment to help the people's liberation movement, anti-colonial movement and liberation movement, wherever they are, mostly in the third world. So these are our principles. I understand what you had in mind. For example, Angola, there was Angola. Was the first, everybody said that because of what happened in Angola, this was the first, so to say, blow on the tank, and that's when the tank started already to deteriorate and to die. But what happened really in Angola? In Angola was, you know, that the Belgian, the Portuguese colonial power has been defeated there, and then the Angolan Republic came up, and there was a lawful government in Luanda, which existed there. Of course, there were different fractions, especially in connection with the fact that the Luanda government proclaimed that they are going to build some form of socialism. Of course, this is different social. We have quite a different experience, different pattern, and we never said that they should repeat our pattern because they also repeat our mistakes. And generally, the whole situation is different. So, but then they said that they're going to start socialism. This, of course, immediately had created some worries in the United States. And there were some fractions in Angola which tried to fight this government. We had several talks with Secretary Kissinger that we should be very careful about that. We should not somehow, you know, destroy the time because of what is going on in Angola. There is a lawful government. We should both support this government. We should both stick to this coalition government which was at that time. But Kissinger didn't listen. And he supported, and the American government decided to support this fraction which was fighting the Luanda government. Now, after that, actually, the Luanda government stayed in power with our help. And this was explained as one of the examples of Soviet penetration, or Soviet infiltration, or Soviet expansion, and of Soviet attempt to make problems for the United States and to, so to say, endanger American interest and so. But look now, what happens now in Angola? In Angola has the same government, very friendly towards us, the same government which was there. Some people changed, Neto died, and you know some more, but the system, the government is the same. So Angola is now selling oil to the United States, Gulf oil and some other American, Texaco and other American companies are buying all the Angolan oil. Boeing company is buying all the strategic minerals which are very useful for American defense, and this is also bought by the American company. We did not influence. If we would want to make trouble for the United States, then we certainly could influence this Luanda government and tell them, don't deal with Americans, don't sell them. We could buy their oil, we could buy their strategic materials, but we didn't interfere. They want, they need this currency, they want, of course, they could trade with America, and they do it. And I was recently at a conference when there was a representative of Texaco. And also this question came up about Angola. And then he got up and he said, well, what is it about Angola? You know, he said that we are now investing $300 million to develop Angolan oil fields, and the Cuban troops which are there are protecting American settlements of American specialists who are working and developing Angolan oil fields. And we are very interested in keeping the Cubans there, because then otherwise these guerrillas will come and will destroy the oil fields, and but now we invest new money, and we want to keep them there, and we want our government to have good relations with them both. So you see, if you take this example, so there on the surface, I look that the Soviet Union has done something terrible, but I don't see really that we have done something that would scare America to such a way that they're going to fight us and to have 20 million casualties and to start a nuclear war because they just want to liquidate us, that we shouldn't exist. What was such a danger for America? I just cannot understand it.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Berezhkov, I understand that you were interpreter at the talks between Germany and the Soviet Union prior to the beginning of World War II. As you know, the secret supplementary protocol of the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact, in that protocol, Nazi Germany granted the Soviet Union dominance over Eastern Poland and the Baltic states, which countries were then shortly thereafter occupied by the Soviet Union and forcibly incorporated into the Soviet Union in violation of their existing constitutions and the will of their people. My question is, since this pact has now expired, wouldn't it be time for the Soviet Union to withdraw their occupation forces from these countries and grant them the right to re-establish their independence in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations? Thank you very much.
Well, I think that first of all it is necessary to make some corrections in your presentation, because it was not only a question, it was only a statement, you see. So I have some other views about this statement. The problem is that we certainly had a long history of relations with Poland, a very long history, and you know that there was a time when the Poles were in Moscow and they brought the Tsar with them, you know, and there were times where the Poles were in Kiev, recent, not so long ago during the First World War and so on. The problem was that when the October Revolution happened, we had proclaimed to all the previous Tsarist possessions to grant them independence. And I think that Poland got independence, first of all, because of October Revolution. If October Revolution would not happen, Poland would remain part of the Tsarist Empire and part of the German Empire. So we made it possible for Poland, for Finland, for other states to become independent because of the October Revolution. But at that time, we were very much exhausted by the First World War, by the Civil War, by the intervention of many countries, of 14 countries, including the United States. And in spite of the fact that after the war, Lord Curzon, an a British diplomat, proposed a line, the so-called Sir Curzon line, which would be the border between the Soviet Russia and Poland. And this Curzon line was accepted internationally, and this line goes along the present border, which now exists, the present border between Poland and the Soviet Union. In spite of that, Poland, using our weakness, marched towards territories which were predominantly Ukrainian and Belarusian, occupied this territory, and imposed upon us in 1921 the so-called Riga Treaty, according to which we had to accept this new border, which was very near to such big capitals like Minsk, Kiev, and which gave to Poland a considerable eastern territory, which was actually inhabited not by the Poles. Only in some cities there were the Poles, but in this overall this was predominantly to maybe to 90%. It was a population of Ukrainians and of the Russians. So when we understood that the Germans are going to attack Poland, and that certainly Poland will be unable to resist and to push back the German invasion, we took care that these territories, which even before 21 were considered by the British and by the international community as Soviet territories, as Russian and Ukrainian, and Belarusian territories, that they should not get under the German occupation. So it was not the division of Poland, it was the restoration of this just aspiration of the Ukrainian and of Belarusian population, and the border, which then came up in '39 after Poland was destroyed by Germany. This border went along the lines of the Curzon line. So it was actually the same Curzon line. When we had these talks, when I was also present in Tehran and other places, there was again talk about the Soviet borders and how they will be after the war. And it was accepted by Churchill, by Roosevelt, by all the main participants of the anti-Hitler coalition, that the border should again be along the Curzon line. And the map which was brought by Churchill, it was the old Curzon line, and with some changes, some of them in favor of Poland and some of them in favor of the Soviet Union, this line exists now, so there is no question about some kind of Polish occupation and so on. I could say about the Baltic states. Yeah, there's another story. Let's start with this story now. Now, this story about the Baltic states is one which also, you see, can be looked upon differently. You know that after the revolution in these Baltic states, and also in Finland, there was also a revolution. And there was a Soviet government, not Soviet ruled from Moscow, but Soviet as system of government, which was established in all the Baltic states and was established in Finland. Then there was a coup against this government, which was a very bloody coup, and I know personally many people who participated in this previous Soviet, in the sense not Russian, in the sense that Soviet Baltic governments which were there, or Finland. They take Ursinen, for example, or take, for example, those people. Well, just lost his name. Was a very famous person from the Baltic states. So you see, at that time, it was already an experience of socialists, in the government which proclaimed socialists in this country. They were afterwards suppressed by other forces, and that's how this new government came about, which existed until 40, I think, even not 39, 40. Only in 40 there was a referendum in each of these countries, and according to this referendum, which was published, the results of which was published, these countries were incorporated into the Soviet Union as independent republics, as in the same way as other 15 republics are independent republics of in the Soviet Union. And they have their own governments, they have their own parliaments, they have their own way of life, which is very different from our way of life. So that there may be people who are dissatisfied with this development. It's quite natural, but there are also many people who are quite satisfied with that development.
Just a moment, please. One short follow-up, yes.
Mr. Berezhkov, in all due respect to your opinions, but I'm sure you weren't born or didn't live in the Baltic States. I did, and my parents also. And from my own experience and their experience, I can tell you that your presentation is not correct. The Baltic states did not have a communist government which was overthrown with a war of independence, and the Soviet Union incorporated these countries against the constitution of these countries. The upper chamber was never called into session to ratify it. With Soviet military forces in the country, there was only one slate of candidates, only the Communist Party candidates, and nobody could vote for anybody else. And these people then, without the approval of the upper chamber, voted for incorporation. Thank you.
Mr. Paul.
Mr. Berezhkov,
Yes, maybe I still say a few words, you see, because, you see, I understand you, certainly, I understand many people also in our country. So I said that it was really, our revolution and the whole struggle around this revolution was really very hard time for our history and for history of these people. There were different people, you see, different. Some people accepted it, and some people accept it now. You say about the voting, even if there is one candidate, but there is a secret ballot. Everybody can strike out this name. Certainly he can. Well, why not? He can strike out this name. And then we have in some cases, you see, in some cases where there are very unpopular. For example, take it on the local level, on the city level. There are sometimes very unpopular political leaders, and their name is they strike his name out. And in that case, he is just not elected. This thing happens. So he may be not elected. It is also one form of expressing its views. They are not forced to vote for, or they can vote against. The other point which I wanted to stress is that really this was a certain fight between privileged classes and between those who were not so privileged before. And I accept that there are people certainly who suffered, who lost their property, who lost their influence, who lost many of their possibilities, and certainly they are dissatisfied with the state of affairs there. But on the other hand, there are also people who are satisfied. I know many people who are I don't know, in Estonia, for example, a friend of mine, who is now vice president of the Academy of Sciences of Estonia. He was, all his ancestors were peasants, illiterate people, and he is now vice president. It was because of the Soviet power and possibilities that he had. One of them, it's one of the examples. It may happen also here that somebody who was a farmer can become a president, like we saw with President Carter. So it happens everywhere.
Mr. Berezhkov, I was reading the write-up on you, and you have seen and dealt with personalities like great historical figures like Hopkins, Harriman, Hull, Franklin Roosevelt, Churchill, Chu Enlai, Marshall Chu Thay. We have heard of them, read of them in various other ways, but would you like to reflect upon them, not as politicians, but as human beings, how they came across to you? That's the kind of picture we never get, either from the media or from history.
Well, I don't know whether it is interesting for whole presence. Yes, because it is a very long story. One can talk about that.
Perhaps you could pick out one or so.
Yes, well, of course, maybe for you as being Americans, it is interesting to hear what a person, Russian, who has met President Roosevelt would think about him. And I think that he had, of course, first of all, that everybody knew that he is a great personality, you see, and certainly everybody knew. And when you meet such people, and when you have to deal with them, and to translate or to be present in the talk, of course you are influenced by this already existing image of this person. And certainly he was a strong personality. But on the other hand, I would say that he also somehow probably had a lot of experience. A lot of experience because, for example, I was present when this first meeting was between Stalin and Roosevelt in Tehran. It was the very first meeting when they saw each other. You know that President Roosevelt lived in our embassy because of all these rumors about possible assassination attempts and German agents and spies who were active in Tehran at that time. So he lived in our but he has his own quarters. And Stalin came to this house, to this building, to this villa where Roosevelt lived, and Roosevelt was already there. And they started their talk like they have been seeing each other maybe a week ago, a couple of weeks ago. They just said hello to each other and started this talk without any estrangement or any attempt somehow to start to feel each other better, somehow to explore each other before they could develop some relationship. I think this was I think it is more a great quality of President Roosevelt, because Stalin has very little experience about dealing before During the war, of course, he had. But before that, he has not much experience. Some people visited him, some foreign writers and foreign political figures, but otherwise, usually some other, like Litvinov or Molotov, mostly dealt with international affairs directly with foreigners. And but I understood that I had a feeling that he also felt somehow quite, so to say, quite easy, I would say, with President Roosevelt from the very beginning. So I think that this was one of the important qualities which show that so you can deal even with very difficult situation and with person of quite different background, because certainly Stalin's background and Roosevelt's background was something quite different. The experience was different. And the other thing is also, I think that why we appreciate especially President Roosevelt, I think that he was sincere about his idea that we could maintain our good relationship after the war and could extend our cooperation on the post-war period. I think that he was sincere about that, and I think that there was certain evidence that he was prepared to do something about that, and there was certainly a relationship established between Stalin and Roosevelt, and a certain degree of trust, I would say, also in spite of the problems. There were a lot of problems during the war which divided us, but at the same time there was a certain degree of trust, and I think that if Roosevelt would live maybe a year or two or maybe more, longer, especially this dangerous post-war period, we may have had a different relationship, although of course many problems would come up, but maybe they would be solved in a different way, and our reaction may have been also different if we would know that we have here a person who is sincerely trying to maintain and to save our relationship for the future. I don't know how, the British say, and Churchill liked to repeat this phrase, that Britain has never permanent friends. Britain has only permanent interests. So if this was the attitude of America, it was different. But if really there was a possibility of developing maybe not friendly but normal relations, I think it could be done if you would have another president, not Truman. Truman certainly was, as we see it, very much anti-communist and anti-Soviet, and he demonstrated it from the very beginning.
Rabbi Polycom.
Mr. Berezhkov, I want to pose my question on the SALT Treaty on which you spend so much time. But before I come to that, I just want to testify. I think that you know, but for the people here, that what this gentleman said was true, because I was in Lithuania when the Russians marched in, and the elections they had were only under the Russian gun. And they took everything that was possible to be moved right out of Lithuania, right the first thing when they came in there. So I think you know all these things, but I think these people don't know it. And I think you ought to understand that we are well informed. We don't have to rely upon Russian propaganda in order to get the news. And when you talk about the fact of the SALT treaties, you can have a SALT treaty. It's Russia that's holding it up. The only thing you have to do is to say, we agree to on-site inspection. You never did agree to on-site inspection. What are you afraid of? Say, we trust the Russians? Why should we? Like they did with the Helsinki Treaty? They've torn it to shreds. They murder their own people. You say a new society. It's not a new society. A slave society has been in existence all from time immemorial. So on what basis are we to trust? You won't even permit on-site inspection. Why don't they come out and say, yes, we will agree on on-site inspection. You'll have a treaty tomorrow.
The SALT agreement, the SALT treaty, has a provision on verification of this treaty. There was never a point raised in connection with SALT II agreement that there should be some other way of verification which is accepted in this treaty. The very system of verification is as it is formulated in the treaty, is by national technical means. That was acceptable for the United States, and that is acceptable for the Soviet Union. And the treaty, it is not a problem that we don't have the treaty because we rejected the on-site inspections. There was even never a question raised like that. If this question will be raised, we certainly will consider this. I have many Americans, friends, who told me that the best thing for the Russians would be immediately to agree on on-site inspection. Then the Americans would not let the Russians to come and to have on-site inspection. I don't know whether it's true or not, but at any rate, I must tell you that our president, Berezhkov, recently said that we are prepared to continue talks on basing ourselves on the SALT II agreement, and that as far as verification is concerned, we consider that the technical national means is up to now, which is mostly satellites, from which we can see much more than we can see. I'm here looking at this harbor. I don't know what's, maybe you make a nuclear bomb somewhere there on the side of it, but I don't know about that. But a satellite, of course, will tell you and tell us what it's all about. So it's a much more effective inspection. But at the same time, our president said that if other proposals will come up of additional means of inspection, we will be prepared to consider them and to discuss them. So let us start talking. It's not that we refuse to do something.
Yes, Mr. Berezhkov, thank you for coming. I like to think of the day when the Soviet people and the American people and the peoples of the world will all be at peace. You speak of the Americans being uncomfortable about the Soviet Union. Are the Soviet Union persons also uncomfortable about America? And if they are not uncomfortable, why do you have such a big military buildup? Also, why Afghanistan?
Well, about military buildup, I must tell you that we have been trying always to catch up with America. All through the post-war years, America was stronger than we were. And we were trying to catch up, and we have been thinking that by the beginning of the 70s, we finally got this parity with America. But of course, we also feel uneasy, because you see, if you look at the map, you will see that actually we are surrounded by American forces. You have your submarines much nearer to our shores than we have, and most of your weapons directed against our cities, they have only about 7 minutes warning time, if you look at that. So 7 minutes, that means 7 minutes. No decision can be taken in 7 minutes. You have more, 30 minutes warning time. Not so much. So both of us are uneasy about what we possess now. There are always talk about evacuation of solid cities. How can you evacuate even such a considerable small town like Baltimore in 30 minutes? What can we do? We probably will not even able to get down to our cars, to drive where. So this is all nonsense. So of course, probably we both are uneasy about that. The military buildup is not only ours, it's on both sides. And actually, you have more. Americans and more warheads, more sophisticated weapons, and everybody accepts that. And you have also much more weapons which are not vulnerable. You keep about 70% of your nuclear warheads, you keep underwater, and you keep them in such places which we cannot trace and cannot get to. While we keep 80% of our weapons on our land-based silos, which you know where they are and which you can hit in 30 minutes, actually. So in this sense, we are much more vulnerable because you will always have a lot of other weapons to strike back. But in general, this whole talk is just fantastic because it means that when you strike us back, already both our countries will not exist. So somebody will strike back, but what comes next? So that's why I have been trying to stress the idea that in spite of all these worries and uneasiness that we have, and in spite of this distrust, and in spite of the fact that many people may be dissatisfied and may think that we did something wrong, there are a lot of things which America certainly made wrong. I think the Mexicans some time ago considered that some territories were not quite voluntarily passed over. And even some American states wanted some time to separate and were, suppressed rather severely, So in history, many things happen. So does it mean that we have to destroy each other because something happened in our history? We are now existing. Our people, we are here, your children, and we are here, and their children will still exist. So what can we do for them? If we will be thinking back what happened in 41 or in 40 and 39, of course some things happened in history everywhere. But you must understand it about the Baltic state. At that time we had to defend our country. We knew that Germany would attack us, you see? So we had also to think about that. Afghanistan certainly has nothing to do with what has been said here about our push towards the Persian Gulf and about our desire to occupy, the oil fields of Arabian oil fields and so on. It was entirely a matter of relationship of our two countries and of developments in Afghanistan. We have a very good relationship with Afghanistan, with many regimes, with the monarch regime which was there, very good relations, and with the Dawood regime which came after the monarchy, and it was no problem for us. We didn't want to have any changes in Afghanistan. But in April of 78, some people in Afghanistan, Taraki, and other people in Afghanistan decided that they can make a revolution in Afghanistan, that they can start a new life. Afghanistan is certainly a very backward country. Everybody knows that it is a country which lived maybe in the 17th or 16th century. All their way of life was nothing to do with what we understand as a normal sort of civilized life. Even whatever attitude you have toward us, Afghanistan was still worse. So they wanted to change life there, and they came to Moscow, and they told us that they want to start a socialist revolution in Afghanistan. And I must tell you, frankly, that we discouraged them. We told them that we think that Afghanistan is not right for a socialist revolution. That they have still to go through a very, very long road because that people will be prepared to start such a revolution. But they didn't listen. They said that this is the only way, the only time in history, that they are ready to do it, that they have people in the army, that the revolution will be bloodless, that they will do it overnight, and they went back to Kabul, and after some weeks they made this revolution, and it was really bloodless. They just overthrew it, and then the most difficult problem came then, because they proclaimed all these reforms, the land reform, the educational reform, abolishing of big private property, and all kinds of things like that. And of course, or liberating women in Afghanistan, this is something terrible. It's not just equal rights amendment, it's much more serious problem. It's not just killing their wives if they dare to go out without covering their face, or if they dare to participate in social or some economic activities. The husband will just kill his wife because of that, not the authorities. So the system is very severe, and they wanted to change the system. It's very difficult to change the system. Certainly, these people who were deprived of their wealth, they started to fight back, and there was actually a civil war starting in Afghanistan. And they asked us, certainly now we have this revolution. You're the only one who can help us because we have this socialist revolution, so send your advisors. And had them as these advisors teach us how we should implement this educational, and of course we sent these advisors. And then some of the advisors were killed. And then some of these rebels started to get help from Pakistan, from Egypt, from the United States, from China, and the government was in trouble. And then they said that, well, we know that, Saddam, before he was assassinated, he just said that the United States was buying Soviet arms from the very beginning of this revolution, from April 78, and buying in Egypt Soviet old arms and sending them over to these rebels in Afghanistan. And so this government came to us and said that now we are in a situation that either we will be destroyed or we still want to have these reforms in Afghanistan. And we have this commitment to the liberation movement. We consider that what they were trying to do was actually a good thing, maybe in the long run. And I also see why it is such an outcry in America, democratic country. If they want to liberate women, if they want to give their farmers land, if they want to educate their children, to send the children to school, why should you help those people who are killing these children and killing the teachers and killing these women and the farmers who till the land? Why should you not help this new government which wants to introduce progressive reforms? So that's how we got caught up. But we want to get out of Afghanistan. We don't want to stay in Afghanistan. There are a lot of proposals. And the Afghan government wants also to have guarantees that there will not be any more intervention from Pakistan, and that there will be international guarantees, and then we will be able to go to get our troops out of Afghanistan. So there is a very special case. It has nothing to do with Soviet aggression or something like that.
Yes, sir. He seems very opposed to American spirit of Soviet Union. Was it will have to be persuasive in Syria? But after the USSR was invaded, Hungary, Poland, gas,
Czechoslovakia, East Germany.
the USSR is not tried to squash religion and the freedom to emigrate by people who are not allowed to pray, practice their religion, teach their children their religion. How can Americans, how can we see the USSR with anything but a nation or even a monster feared and to be protected?
Well, this is of course the problem, how to deal with this problem. Yeah, we have many